In this video, you're going to get introduced to the backend and understand how to become a web developer. Now, if you are comfortable with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you must be able to create static web pages and serve them from a server. So this is how it works at the moment. So your users will type a URL in their browser, and then they will send a request through that URL to a server. Now, depending on your file, you will have a few requests which are going to be sent to the server, including your HTML file, your CSS file, any JavaScript files, any pictures, and so on. So all these files are going to be served as static content from the server. Then your browser is going to combine those files and display the web page for you. So this is how it works for static content. So what you see in the left hand side is what we call the front end. That is the client side. And that's basically your client or your user sitting in front of a computer and having access to a browser. So that's the front end. Now on the right hand side, that's the server side or the back end. Now, if you work only with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and create static web pages, then all your work will contribute to the front end because you are building those HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, which are needed by the browser to display a web page. And your work at the moment is very limited on the back end, and all you have to do at the moment is upload those files to the backend without having to write any code on the backend. So in this case, you can work as a front-end web developer and create static web pages. Now, if you want to work as a back-end web developer as well and become a full-stack web developer, meaning that you master both the front end and the back end, you need to be able to write code on the server side and create dynamic web pages. Now, to understand the difference between a dynamic web page and a static web page, let's have a look at these two YouTube videos. Now, if you check the web pages of these two videos, you'll see that they are actually both following the same templates. And what YouTube is doing, it's actually filling that template using the details of each video. So those details include things like the title of the video, the number of views, the likes, dislikes, the user, the number of subscribers for that user, the description of the video, and so on. So basically, we are using the same templates. Now, if you check the URLs of each video, you'll see that they are actually using the same URL. But the only thing that changes is what we call a query, which is coming after the question mark. So that query is specifying the value of a parameter v. So YouTube gave each of its videos a parameter v to identify that video. So if you type any URL starting with this chunk and followed by v equals something like that, then YouTube is going to look for the correct video matching that value, and it's going to fill this template for you using the details of the video it could find in the database. So this is a good example of a dynamic web page. Now let's go back to the static case where users type a URL and get a static web page. Now let's go through a simple analogy representing the static web page or the static web page process. Now, if you go to a PC shop and you ask if you can have a laptop that you can see right there on the shelf, then that is your request. And as a response, you get, yes, sure, you can have that laptop right now. So basically, before asking for this laptop, you actually knew exactly what you wanted and you knew the location of that laptop. So when you are requesting a static web page, you know exactly the URL of that web page. And if you mistype the URL, it's not going to work. So you know where the web page is located on the server because you've got the right URL. And also, all the server has got to do is hand the web page to you without having to do too much work. So the front end in this example is yourself behind the till, and the back end is the shop, although the shop didn't have to do too much work. It's very minimal work here because all they had to do is hand the laptop to you. Now let's compare this example with an example where the back end has got more work to do. So let's say that you want to buy a laptop, but this time you want a customized laptop. So let's say that you want a laptop fulfilling certain conditions like the disk size, memory, color, etc. So let's keep it simple for now and say that you want a customized laptop that you can't buy off the shelf. So you're not going to go to that shop to buy that laptop because you simply won't find it there. So let's say that you are going to send a request to the assembly line. And a good example of this is the company Dell, who creates or can make customized laptops for you, depending on the specifications that you provide when placing your order. Now, the assembly line is where you've got all the machines assembling computers. Now, this will need something else to operate. It needs the PC components, which are normally stored inside a warehouse. Now, the assembly line will send a query to the warehouse asking for the necessary components in order for them to build your laptop. So once they get those components from the warehouse, then now they are ready to build your laptop. So once they assemble your laptop, they're going to ship it to you. Now let's go back to our world and understand how this analogy works. So on the left hand side, we had a client ordering a customized laptop, right? So when talking about dynamic web pages, we're going to have the front end where the user types a URL asking for a dynamic web page. So that's one is asking for a customized laptop, and that's one is asking actually for a customized HTML web page. Now, the assembly line is going to be represented by the server and an app inside the server. So what does it mean? So in YouTube's case, YouTube has got an app inside its server which builds a web page for you every time you ask for a video. So that app is going to populate that template and display a nice video web page for you. And then we've got a database, which is the equivalent of the warehouse. Now, in order for YouTube to build the web page for you, it needs to retrieve the video details which are stored inside a database. And it's going to use those video details to build the template or populate the template for you. And that's basically how it works. First of all, the user is going to send a request to the server through a URL. And by the way, the URL is going to be generated by the website once you click on the search button. So you don't have to type the URL manually, as you know. So in this case, we want a customized web page showing properties not further than 5 kilometers from Cambridge, with a rent between £500 and £1,000, and a number of bedrooms between 2 and 3. So all these parameters are going to be included in the URL, and then we're going to send a request to the server. Now, once the server receives our request, the app inside the server is going to transform our request or our query inside the URL to a JavaScript object which looks like this. So you've got a location, a max distance, rent min, rent max, etc. And then the app is going to do some further work. And now it's going to realize that it needs to query these details inside the database of properties. So you're going to have a query running in the database, which looks like this. So you will find a table inside the database looking like this. So this is going to be, for example, the properties table. And for each property, you're going to have certain details like the ID of the property, its location, the rent, number of bedrooms, etc. So once you run this query, if any properties are found, so in this example, let's say that that property fulfills the conditions of the search, since the rent is between 500 and 1000, and also we are fulfilling the other conditions. So once you find these properties, then the database is going to send a response to our app, like this, and then our app is going to start working again, and is going to use the details of those properties we found to build the customized HTML web page, which is going to be served to the user by the server. And then the browser is going to display that customized HTML web page. Hopefully this gave you a good understanding of how the backend works. Now the app that is inside the server and which does all the work from receiving the request from the client to sending the query to the database to receiving the response from the database and building the customized web page, that's what you need to build inside your server when building a backend website or a dynamic website. So in order for you to do that, you need to learn the right technology which is supported by your server, then use that technology to write code which can execute on the server side. There are many technologies which you can learn for this purpose. This includes Node.js, PHP, Python, Ruby, and many others. Now, the most popular one at the moment is Node.js, and that is the technology or platform you are going to learn later on in this module. Before we continue to further examples, I'd like to mention something important. When you make a request to a server through a URL, and the server needs information from a database, sometimes the database is not going to be located on the same server. So your server or your app is going to query a database located inside another server. And then it's going to receive a response, and then your app is going to respond to the user. To illustrate this, you can have a look at any website using Facebook comments. So when you load this web page, for example, the comments that you see there are retrieved from Facebook's database. They are not retrieved from this website's database. So this is a really good example showing that your app can actually communicate with a database outside your server and retrieve any data it needs to be delivered to your end users. Now let's go through some further examples and explore what's happening behind the scenes. So we're going to go back to our YouTube example. So here is the video webpage. As we said earlier, YouTube will populate this template using details of this video. So to retrieve those details, YouTube will need to use that value that you find in the URL. So here is how it works. The end user at the front end is going to type this URL, or the URL is going to be generated somehow, for example, from the search results. So a request is going to be sent to the YouTube server. This request is going to be received by the app which is hosted on this server. Now, this app will need to communicate with a database and ask for details about the video which has got this value in the database. So this is how it looks like. So the videos table in YouTube, which is going to be inside a database, will contain details like these ones. So the v value we talked about earlier, the title of the video, the user ID, this corresponds to the user who uploaded the video, the number of views, likes, dislikes, and so on. So we are interested now in the video with the v value, which is equal to that value. So inside the database, we're going to look for that video, and once we find that value, then that's the row we are looking for. So what's going to happen now is we're going to get all the details of that row, and that corresponds to the details of our video. Now, if you check the video page, you'll see that there are some details about the user corresponding to that video. So this includes their username, the number of subscribers. So to retrieve those details, the app will need to run another query to another table, and that's the users table. So it's going to use the user ID we had there to find details about that specific user. So this includes their username, number of subscribers, and so on. So the query here is going to be select all the rows with that user ID. And here we go. Once we find that row, we just get the details of that row. And then we use those details to populate our templates. Now let's check another example where you search a certain keyword in YouTube. So the results will be a web page like this. So again, this is a template, and it's filled with the results which are retrieved from a database. So let's understand how this works. So the user is going to send a request using this URL to the server, and in the request you will see that there is a query, and there is a value there, search query, which is set to nature. So that's happening at the front end. Now, once the server receives the request with that URL, then it's going to break down the query, and it's going to communicate with the videos database, looking for all videos with a title containing variants of the keyword nature. So if the title contains nature, then that's going to be included in the results. If it contains a word like natural, for example, then it's also going to be included in the results because natural is a variant of nature. So here's how it works. So that's our videos table inside the database. So we're looking at this column, title. So the query to run is selecting all the rows with a title including variants of nature. So once we find matches, the database is going to send those matches back to the app, and then the app is going to build the web page using those matches. And then the web page is going to be sent back to the front end. In the next video, we will check some other examples.